In case you've been living under a rock, the Wilderness bosses have just been updated and dropped new powerful upgrades. Items like the Skull of Vetion can be combined with a Thammarin Scepter to create the new Accursed Scepter, and in this video I'll be unlocking their powers. The Wilderness has finally been rejuvenated. Each of the three major demi-bosses, Vetion, Callisto and Venenatis, have been relocated, reskinned and remechanized. These can all be found within the new Wilderness boss layer, a multi-combat zone deep within the Wilderness. The Claws of Callisto, Fangs of Venenatis and Skull of Vetion can each be combined with the Wilderness Mace, Bow and Scepters to boost the power of each and unlock new special attacks. Bear Down adds a bleed to the target, dealing 20 damage over 6 seconds, prevents the target from running for 6 seconds and also reduces their agility level by 20. Swarm unleashes 4 rapid attacks with increased accuracy and reduced damage whilst also infecting the target with poison. And finally Condemn. The max hit and accuracy of the staff is increased by 50%, which then lowers the defense and magic of the target by 15%. Each of the special attacks costs only 50% special attack energy, with the Accursed and Thammarin Scepters now being able to function as both powered and standard staves, capable of casting spells from the standard and ancient spellbooks. Each of the weapons has a 50% damage and accuracy boost against any NPC inside the Wilderness, so these are going to continue to be the go-to weapons for anything PvM related there. So let's go test these out. First up we have the Mace. Now in max melee gear I have a strength bonus of 145, which is a 51. In the Wilderness that's a 76, an 85 on task, and an 87 with a salve amulet. An 87 with a one-handed weapon. With a boost from a Revenant Maledictus, that's a 100. A 100! Yeah, that's pretty strong. Now for the Webweaver bow, I'm in max range gear, so the max hit is a 33, 49 in the Wilderness, 55 on task, and with a special attack that means it can hit an 88. So that'd be a 105 if all of the special attacks hit roll their max hit with a Revenant boost. And finally, with max mage, the scepter hits a 40, 60 inside the Wilderness, 66 with a salve, 68 on task, and with the spec that should be a 103. And with a Revenant boost, that's a 118. That's a big hit. Someone post that on Reddit and I'm sure you're going to get some upvotes. Oh yeah, I forgot there's also one more item. And his name is John C. That's right, the Korasi sword is back, but this time it's taken a new form and name and it's called the Voidwaker. Its melee stats are comparable to an Abyssal Whip or Dagger, sitting just between the two, with a special attack hitting 50 to 150% of its melee max hit, with a 100% hit accuracy. It can hit over a 75 and it never misses. Undoubtedly, these weapons are going to be great for fighting back in PvP. With the Ursine Mace, just as you're coming out of a freeze, you can spec to slow their advance or prevent them from crossing the agility obstacles to help get you that escape. You can land some potential anti-PKs with a Webweaver bow, Accursed Scepter and Voidwaker, as these are all really accurate specs. Couple these with a well-timed Venge and you could be walking away with a bit more than Dragon Plate legs. Now that's just PvP. What about PvM? Well, I've been testing out each of these throughout RuneScape and the TLDR is, the Mace and Bow suck. Sorry if you're a bag holder, but the Accursed Scepter and Voidwaker are really good. I can't believe the Scepter is going for so cheap. I honestly think this is actually a slept on item. That or there is just a ridiculous amount of them coming into the game. The reason that the Scepter is so good is that 1, it's a ranged variant of a Dragon Warhammer, albeit with a slightly lower defense reduction, but where it really shines is on anything where you want it to mage. Unlike ranged or melee accuracy and defense rolls, magic rolls against their magic and defense levels, 70% from magic and 30% from defense. So previously, a Dragon Warhammer spec and BGS specs added virtually 0 additional DPS when attacking with magic. Well, now you can reduce your target's magic level by 15% and their defense by 15%, with just a single item. Before we only had vulnerability. You needed a Tome of Water to boost it up to 15%, then the only reliable way of reducing magic was actually with a Circle, as it had a 100% hit accuracy and would also reduce their magic level by the damage you dealt with it. Unfortunately though, you can't reduce their magic level after you've spec'd with an Accursed Scepter, which would have been some nice tech, but maybe we should cry on Reddit and get it changed. Anyway, first up I was trying the Accursed Scepter out. Now there's a few scenarios where this is really beneficial, and how beneficial it is really depends on what your setup and bank is like. I'll explain a bit more later, but one great place to use it in, believe it or not, is actually in the Inferno with a magic only run. Instead of a T-bow, you can actually take a Shadow into the Inferno, and for me, I think I actually prefer a magic only run to a hybrid mage or range setup as you would do normally. With a magic run, you can go full magic offense and land freeze after freeze after freeze, really simplifying the waves. Couple that with an imbued heart and you have a single slot stat and damage boost. At Tzkal-zuk and Jad, the Accursed Scepter proved really useful. You can expect to reduce their magic and defense levels by 15%, so with a max setup, compared to a T-bow, you go from being around 23% lower than a T-bow to only 11%. You're not going to be breaking any records, but the waves are just so much easier. I'll be releasing a walkthrough for the Inferno in the near future, so drop a like and subscribe if you want to see that. Of course, we have to try the magic raid, which you actually need melee mostly for, but we won't talk about that. Here is where you can really make use of it. Now, unlike in the Chambers of Xeric, where gearing for a ranger's priority, in the Tombs of Amaska, once you have a Fang and a Bofur, your next go-to item should be a Tumikin's Shadow. And depending on the raid level you're running, let's say a 300 to 350, if you have a Bofur and a Tumikin's, when you land a spec, it's actually better to camp the Shadow at Zebak and Baba, and arguably even Kefri. What helps in TO even more is that the magic accuracy of the bosses is actually higher than the magic level, so even when you use the spec here, because the T-bow's accuracy and damage roll is based off of whichever is the highest of the magic offense and magic level of the target, it doesn't actually affect anyone that's using a T-bow negatively. It obviously helps even more because of the defense reduction. When I was testing it out, it was fine to use on every single boss except Akka, as his stat regeneration is at a much higher rate than the other bosses, so if you're in a large team, definitely bring one a Cursed Scepter. At Chambers, it's useful in a few niche places. For Tecton, the special still works to reduce his defense, so you can land a reliable 15% reduction on his way to you, then switch to a Dragon Warhammer or BGS to spec him down even further with a lower miss chance. Then there's Vestibular's Portal. It's another great place to use it. You can drop the magic and defense levels from afar. In a CM, this is around a 5% DPS increase. Even if you don't have a Shadow, it's still a good option to spec because with a T-bow and Bofur, despite reducing its magic level, the defense reduction more than makes up for the loss there. It's a net gain in DPS. And obviously, the Mage Hand at Ulm. Specking here will increase your DPS around 5% for a Sang and Trident, but only around 2% for a Shadow, which is one of the key value adds with it. The DPS increase with a Trident or Sang to the DPS increase with a Shadow is relatively higher from pre to post spec. The accuracy of the Shadow is just crazy high anyway. Does that make sense? Basically, you'll feel the benefit more with a Sang and Trident than you would with a Shadow. At places like God Wars, the Scepter is still pretty useful. It's not a game changer by any means, but as you'll be on Ancients to land freezers and in magic gear anyway, you may as well use the spec for that for the extra DPS boost and extra chance to land freezers. Speaking of God Wars, let's take a look at how the Voidwaker held up. Now at Nex, it's not great. You still want to be using ZCB specs if you have one, and failing that, you still want to be using fan specs if not. However, for Grado and Zami, it's actually really strong. Every other kill you'll be able to spec twice at the start, clearing off a quick 100 health and 2 specs. I could see this easily being best in slot for both Zami and Bandos, just because you can chunk off so much of their health so quickly. So if you're on the RCS spellbook as well, you can even bring Death Charge to guarantee you have a 100% spec at the start of each kill. You can get more than enough health back from Guthans, so this should easily replace SGS and Claws here. At the Nightmare, again, it's really good to use here. Instead of having to roll against a 180 slash defense with Claws, you have a 100% hit chance with the Voidwaker and a minimum hit. On the Pillars, if you really wanted to, you could spec there for the memes. As you're rolling double magic damage on the Pillars, you can hit up to a 156 in max melee gear. But you're best off just saving the specs for when you're actually on the Nightmare, as you'll see the most benefit that way. At raids like COX, it's not really suited for use there. At TOB, there may be a few places it could be used, but I don't think it's going to be meta-defining. In larger teams where you have leftover specs, it's potentially useful. With a Salve, you can max it to 90 on bloat, but really, is it going to replace Claws there? Nah. However, at the Tombs of Amaska, it's pretty damn strong, because you can only reduce the defense levels of the bosses there by so much, and in many cases, you have a lot more opportunities to DPS spec there. The range and slash defense of the bosses is also so high, you can consistently get MVPs with it, boosting your overall loot chance, drops and GP per hour. Throughout the raid there are spots where it's better to use, which I'll go into a lot more detail in my future gear guide, so subscribe if you want to see that. But basically, its value add is giving you consistent MVPs, whereas you can sometimes get the inconsistent MVPs with Claws and a ZCB. At Zebak, a ZCB is still meta, but in some cases you can still use a final spec with a Voidwaker, and Dinsball working is still meta at Kefri. Again, you still can use a few specs here and there with a Voidwaker if the room is saturated with Agile Scarabs. And at Akka, you can also use it there for consistent damage on the Shadows, and at Baba it's the best in slot spec weapon there too. I tried out a few various setups to see if using items like an Occult or Tormented Bracelet for the extra % base damage made a difference, but it does just roll off your melee strength bonus and level. Overall, I think it's a really good addition to the game. If you're wondering where it sits in the spec weapon lineup list, it's edging slightly ahead of Claws, but still behind a ZCB. But would I buy one? Absolutely. Just maybe wait a little until its value drops closer to the price of Dragon Claws. What do you think? How are you liking the new weapons? Let me know in the comments below, and I will see you in the next one.